Hi, welcome back to Com 225, and today we're going to be looking at methods of delivery. Now, this chapter is a bit on the shorter side, but it does look into the four different types of how you present. And so, with this chapter, we're looking at what goes into your speech beforehand, the preparation. Is there any preparation? And then also thinking about impromptu speeches of, hey, why don't you get up and start talking to us, right? So all of these different styles. Now they do have some pros, they do have some cons. And so let's look at the first one, which is a manuscript style. I look at this one as we are just reading verbatim, word for word, whatever it is. And so you want to think, yes, your speech, it has to be prepared ahead of time. You're going to write it out, and then the speaker reads it word for word. I'm sorry about that typo. Now, this is definitely a common method, a common style with newscasters and also with television personalities. I want you to think about how when people are on the news, those newscasters, they don't have a ton of time to kind of talk to us about the story. Things are rushed, every second counts. Sometimes they have commercials ready, they have other people waiting. And so they have to think to themselves, we need to be really precise in like our message here and our words here. Your book also uses an example of our US president, giving speeches to the nation every couple of years, every couple of moments during their term. And a lot of thought goes into their speech, which then goes on the teleprompter when they're going to be reading it. And so there's no room for like error. They've practiced it. They know the exact word, the exact syllable, the way they want to say things, because, yeah, it is all about precision here. Now, with manuscript style, you can also think too, not skilled presenters, they're going to sound boring. And so if you're not really skilled in presenting and you're there reading the teleprompter, it's going to come off very, very monotone. But when you become more skilled, you're able to kind of add some vocal variety. You're able to just kind of have more fun with the words as you're reading it. And so it definitely does take skill. I really like the second to last bullet point. It says public speaking is about presenting, not reading to an audience. One time I had a friend who was a teacher, and he said that he just read straight from the textbook the entire lecture, the entire class. And I was like, oh, that's going to get boring really, really fast. It's going to get boring for me, the presenter, because I'm just reading straight from a book. I'm not really adding any emotional tone to it. It's going to be boring for you, the audience members, the listeners, because it's like, what am I doing? I can read this myself. But when we look at it as public speaking, I'm presenting this knowledge to you. And so hopefully you're taking something away from that. Now, this type of style, the manuscript style, this is never going to be used in a classroom setting. Shouldn't. Just an example I gave you of my friend that's a teacher. He's actually no longer a teacher. And so I think that's a perfect example of this is what you don't do, right? And so in a classroom setting, especially public speaking, we do not want to just be reading our speeches. Now, here's the second style, and it's a memorized style. I do think that this one is a bit more popular in our lives, but it depends on what you do. And so this is when your manuscript, your outline, your speech, it's committed to memory. Every single word. You know that you can be recited to the audience verbatim. You don't need any notes. And so it's like, you know what you're talking about. Now, just to kind of clarify a little bit, last speech, last style, I have my book in front of me and I'm reading it to you. I don't have it memorized. Now I close the book, I can say it to you verbatim. I think about when I was pretty young, maybe like 5 or 6, and in one of my classes, like preschooler, I'm not really sure what age that was, but I had a book memorized because it was a picture book with very little words. And then my grandpa came over and I started reading that book to him. but I had it memorized. And he thought it was so amazing. And he called my mom over and he was like, she knows how to read. Oh my goodness. But my mom was like, no, she doesn't need to turn the pages though. And sure enough, I didn't need to turn the pages because I had it all memorized up here. So some other examples here are actors on stage. They have their lines memorized. You can also think about debate teams. A lot of times these like really skilled public speakers have their argument really memorized and nailed down. Also, stand-up comedy. Now they go up there, they tell stories, and they want to create an impression that it's spontaneous. They want to create an impression of just feeling close with one another, even though they're telling the same jokes over and over. I would also add to this like concerts. People sing the same songs over and over, years after years, and they're performing to audience members, but they really want to keep it being that close and intimate feeling, but also that impression of, hey, let's be spontaneous and let's have fun here. Now, I think what's important here with the memorized style, because it's not exactly my favorite, because then let's say you have it memorized and then you kind of start forgetting specific words, and then all of a sudden it's like, what was I even talking about, right? You don't even know where you were in your outline in your mind. So I think instead, it's important to really think about memorizing your key points. Don't memorize your word for word speech. Memorize those key points, know exactly what you want to hit on, and then you can have fun and be spontaneous and like fill it in a sense. And practicing will definitely help here too. But just know what's important here. What do I really want to push out to my audience? Here's our third style, and it's the impromptu style. I think this one, you're going to do a lot in your life. It's a short presentation without advanced preparation. You don't know you're going to be talking. You don't really know that you're going to be, vocalizing to an audience. So a good example here is people say like, say a few words, they're excited to hear from you, just encouraging camaraderie. You might be giving a toast that you didn't know about, but I do want to push. Sometimes you do know that you're going to give a toast, like at a wedding or a graduation or party celebration, anything like that. You know ahead of time. Now, I do think that self-introductions, this is a great impromptu style kind of way of speaking, because when you go to class and all of a sudden you have to introduce yourself to 20, 30 people, it's like, ugh, I wasn't ready for this. And then also answering questions in class. The teacher asks you a question, they're waiting around for someone to answer, and you decide to answer. It's a mini impromptu style speech. I look at this too as, it could only be like 10 seconds or so, but you are speaking in front of an audience. Now, this kind of style, you tend to deliver it more naturally and more conversational. I like that because the stakes are like not there. We're natural, we're okay. I'm not worried about anything. But if the speaker is given little to no time to contemplate the central theme, then maybe we're gonna mess up. So not knowing you're going to talk about something, you might not really know what the theme is. You might not really know what exactly am I talking about. So then the message, it ends up getting a little disorganized, and then it's difficult for everybody to listen because it's like, what are you talking about? I think a lot of times people, they end up ranting. And so it's like we're just trying to fill the space with words. And it's like, no, just stick to the central theme, stick to whatever it was the topic is, the question, all of that. Now, this style is going to take time. It takes time and effort to develop, and we're going to develop those skills slowly. The more we do it, the better we're going to get at it, right? Now, here's our last one, and it's the extemporaneous style. This is where our class totally hits on it. It's carefully planned, it's rehearsed, and it's spoken in a conversational manner. You can have notes, and so you can definitely think, how am I going to prepare? How am I going to practice? Because I care and I want to do a good job. This does promotes the speaker to be knowledgeable and credible because you gotta know what you're talking about, right? And no, you don't need to memorize everything, but just knowing your main like key terms, your main topics, and then you're able to kind of start speaking on it in a natural state. That's what's important here. I think about if we're nervous to talk about something, then our knowledge, it kind of gets a little messy, and then our audience, they don't see us as credible. So preparation in both verbal and then also nonverbal components. Knowing when to add some to your words, some hand gestures, nonverbal components of making eye contact and just building that nonverbal immediacy. Now, it is carefully planned, yet it appears very natural, very conversational. That's the big key here. You know, we plan for it so much, but when we're actually going to deliver, it's kind of just in a more informal setting. You're going to learn to connect with your audience, and it's going to then increase your confidence. When I teach public speaking in person, I love to have, activities when everybody goes up and they just talk for like a minute or 2 minutes because I want them to build confidence because then they can look around and see everybody in the audience. This is going to allow for meaningful nonverbal communication. And we're just going to feel stronger and we're going to feel better about it in a sense. So please know with public speaking, this extemporaneous style, this is where it's at. Other styles, I do feel like they have a time and a place and an occasion, but definitely for us, we're planning it, we're practicing it, hopefully, and then we're able to deliver it to our cameras in a conversational and just in an informal setting. Awesome. That was 26. I hope that you enjoyed this chapter and kind of getting to know the different methods. I'll see you in the next one. See you later.